Hi, everyone. I'm Dallas Roberts, and this is my presentation on ethical issues in sex work, legal approaches, and human rights. Sex work raises complex ethical, legal, and human rights questions that are deeply embedded in societal norms and legal frameworks. This issue matters because it directly impacts the dignity, safety, and equality of marginalized populations, particularly women and gender minorities. The presentation will explore background and context of sex work, identify key ethical conflicts, present multiple viewpoints, analyze cross-cultural and interdisciplinary perspectives, review existing research, and propose evidence-based solutions. By examining these dimensions, we aim to understand how legal approaches influence human rights for sex workers and how ethical reasoning can guide policy development. The ethical questions surrounding sex work include whether it is inherently exploitative or a matter of personal autonomy. Competing values such as human rights versus moral norms and safety versus stigma create significant tension. Stakeholders include sex workers, policymakers, advocacy groups, and the general public, each with distinct interests and perspectives. Applying Paul and Elder's ethical reasoning principles involves clarifying concepts, identifying assumptions, and evaluating implications. Their framework encourages critical thinking about the ethical dimensions of sex work, helping to navigate the complex interplay between individual rights and societal values. One major perspective advocates for the decriminalization of sex work as a human rights imperative. Magbako argues that decriminalization promotes autonomy, reduces harm, and aligns with principles of dignity and equality. Ethical reasoning behind this viewpoint emphasizes the importance of respecting individual agency and minimizing state imposed harm. Supporting research indicates that decriminalization leads to improved health and safety outcomes for sex workers, including better access to healthcare and reduced violence. This approach is grounded in a rights-based framework that seeks to empower sex workers and protect them from systemic abuse. Here are some results from New Zealand showing how decriminalization of sex work has worked in their favor. Once sex work has decriminalized, these workers were 70% more likely to report violence. An alternative perspective supports the criminalization of sex buyers, known as the Nordic model. Voljari explains that this approach aims to reduce demand for sex work by penalizing clients rather than workers. The ethical reasoning behind this model focuses on protecting vulnerable individuals from exploitation and shifting societal norms. However, evidence on its effectiveness is mixed. While some argue it reduces trafficking and exploitation, others contend it increases risk for sex workers by pushing the industry underground, causing the reporting of violence to decrease, as shown in this chart. This viewpoint reflects a tension between moral objectives and practical outcomes, highlighting the need for nuanced policy analysis. Different cultures and disciplines offer varied understandings of sex work. Legally, countries adopt diverse frameworks ranging from full criminalization to regulated legalization. Scalar examines legal consciousness of and practices in 4 countries. In the USA, Nevada, legalization, which has regulated brothels permitted in certain states. Northern Ireland and France, client criminalization, so they take on the Nordic model, buying sex is illegal. New Zealand, which is decriminalized, and England and Scotland and Wales, partial criminalization. So selling sex is fine, but related activities like brothel keeping and soliciting are still criminalized. This reveals how law shapes experiences or sexual violence among sex workers. Sociologically, stigma and marginalization persist globally, affecting access to services and social inclusion. From a human rights perspective, universal principles often clash, with cultural norms complicating advocacy efforts. These interdisciplinary insights underscore the complexity of sex work ethics, and the importance of context-sensitive approaches. A review of the literature reveals several key patterns. Decriminalization is consistently linked to better health and safety outcomes for sex workers. Contradictions arise in the evaluation of the Nordic model, with some studies reporting reduced exploitation and others highlighting increased risks. Simons calls for rethinking dignity and exploitation in human trafficking and sex work cases, pointing to gaps in ethical reasoning and policy effectiveness. Overall, the evidence suggests that rights-based approaches are more effective in promoting well-being, but further longitudinal studies are needed to assess long-term impacts and address existing gaps. Evidence-based recommendations include adopting rights-based legal frameworks that prioritize safety, dignity, and autonomy. Simmons emphasizes the need for policies that recognize sex workers' agency and protect them from exploitation. Engaging stakeholders in policymaking ensure that diverse voices are heard and that solutions are contextually appropriate. Addressing stigma through education, social programs can reduce discrimination and improve access to services. These solutions aim to reconcile multiple viewpoints and navigate ethical tensions, though challenges such as political resistance and cultural barriers may limit implementation. Sex work ethics involve navigating issues of autonomy, dignity, and harm reduction within complex legal and cultural landscapes. Key insights include the effectiveness of decriminalization, the limitations of the Nordic model, and the importance of interdisciplinary perspectives. Remaining ethical questions concern the balance between protection and autonomy and the role for societal norms in shaping policy. Further research is needed to evaluate the long-term outcomes and develop inclusive frameworks. Ultimately, addressing sex work ethically requires a commitment to human rights, critical reasoning, and empathy. Here is my bibliography for the resources that I used for this presentation, and thank you for your time.